In Milgram's experiment investigating obedience to legitimate authority, it's really important that you know that the overall obedience in that first baseline study was 65%. And that's because you're going to be comparing all of the variables affecting obedience, such as proximity, location, and uniform. You're going to be comparing all of the obedience levels to that baseline figure of 65%. So I'm going to give you the percentages, but if you can't recall them, the only percentage you have to know is 65%, because all of the other percentages went down. So if you can't recall the percentages, don't sweat it. Just say that obedience went down. So for proximity, there are actually 3 proximity variables that are good to know. The first one you have to know. So proximity 1, when the learner was brought into the same room as the teacher, obedience went down to 40% because they could see the pain that they were suffering. Then proximity 2, the teacher was forced to put the learner's hand onto the shock plate, and that meant that obedience went down to 30% because they just felt even worse. Proximity 3 is where the experimenter gave instructions over the phone, and so obedience to legitimate authority went down to 21% just because that legitimate authority figure wasn't in close proximity to them, so there was less pressure to obey. The next variation is location. So you just need to know that in Yale, in the baseline study, obviously, we know at Yale it was 65%, but when it was moved to a rundown office, obedience went to 48%. And that's because a rundown office just doesn't garner the same legitimate authority as a very prestigious university. Then there was the uniform variation. So that was the lab coat versus when they wore their own clothes, and obedience plummeted to 20% because when somebody gave the instructions using their own clothes without this badge of authority of a lab coat, that just didn't feel like it was a legitimate authority figure. Now, the 2 Rebel study isn't in the specification necessarily, but it's really good to know because you can use it for resistance to social influence. So it's very simple. In the 2 Rebel study, 2 Confederate participants refused to shock the learner, and so obedience went all the way down to 10%. So those are the variables affecting obedience. You can read all about them in my book. So all of the AO1 is on the left and all of the evaluation points are on the right. And so you could write a full 16 marker. The book is called Oxford Revised Psychology. It's an absolute bargain and it will transform your revision. So take the stress out of revision, make life easy on yourself.